Everybody, well, writing in today's Sunday Express, Boris Johnson pleads to MPs, stop holding Britain hostage. And he says Parliament's reluctance to get Brexit done means actually we're being held hostage. The whole country is actually now losing its mind, I think, with Brexit. I've met lots of people over the weekend, people who voted either way, and just this sense of total deadlock in Parliament, and how is it actually going to be breached? Well, tomorrow, for the third time of asking, Boris Johnson will ask the House of Commons to support a plan for a general election. This one a little bit more specific. He's put a date on it, and the date is the 12th of December. Now, under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, he has to get 2/3 of MPs to vote for that, and that number is 434. And it would appear there's very little enthusiasm in the Labour Party for doing any such thing. Overnight, a proposal has come from the Lib Dems and the SNP. And their idea is that rather than going through the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, a simple bill would be introduced. They're specifying the 9th of December, and they're saying they're happy to have an election, but not on Boris Johnson's terms. But I wonder overall, does Boris actually have a point? You know, is our democracy, is our whole governmental process being held hostage by MPs who simply don't want Brexit to happen? So I'm very keen this morning to hear from you. If you're a Lib Dem supporter, an SNP supporter, a Green supporter, a Labour supporter, respond to that jibe from Boris. He says that the men and women representing you are holding the country hostage over Brexit. Tell me, does Boris have a point, or is he wrong? And if he is, please tell me why. Well, joining me to talk about this, and in particular, Labour's position, which is, well, I think confusing for most people, is John McTiernan, former Director of Political Operations, of course, for Tony Blair. John, good morning.
Good morning.
Do the public, I mean, are they going to sympathise with Boris when he says that we're being held hostage?
Well, I think the problem for Boris is he looks impotent, and that's because he is impotent. He sits there, having inherited a very slim majority in the House of Commons. He then expelled his own Conservatives, including the grandson of Churchill, and then he alienated the DUP. So the mess he's in is all his own making, and in politics, the point of being your opposition is to oppose you and cause you pain. So, I mean, whatever the coherence or incoherence of Jeremy Corbyn's position is intellectually, the truth is he's making Boris Johnson dance around and look powerless and impotent. And that's actually a bad look for Boris and a good look for any opposition party. Yeah,
I mean, I completely understand that the job of an opposition is to oppose, but when Jeremy Corbyn himself, and people count the number of times things have been said, and it could be right, it could be wrong, but sort of the guesstimate today is that 35 times Jeremy Corbyn since 2017 has asked for a general election, and we have a government that has lost about 80% of the votes that it's put before Parliament. I mean, we have a complete zombie Parliament, John. I mean, wouldn't it also, yes, opposition's opposed, but don't oppositions also want general elections?
Yeah, look, there's a great phrase from Australian politics. Paul Keating was challenged by the opposition leader, the Liberal Party opposition leader, to a general election. And he said, no, I'm not going to have a general election. I want to do you slowly. And there's no doubt that kind of doing Boris Johnson slowly is part of the issue in the Labour Party. The other thing is, let's be honest, the Labour Party's position on Brexit is not just incoherent, it's incomprehensible. It is that Labour could do a better Brexit deal than Boris Johnson, would then put it to the vote in a referendum and oppose the better deal it negotiated itself.
It wants some working out, doesn't it?
That would be exposed in an election, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think that's right. And I think there is absolutely, as you say, it is incomprehensible. What do you make of the initiative overnight from the Liberal Democrats and the SNP to have a one-line bill aiming at the 9th of December for a general election?
So one thing that upsets me as a traditionalist is to see people playing around with the notion that we can have elections on other days than Thursdays. I mean, why couldn't they choose a date that was a Thursday? But they too are just seeking their own interest. This is not for the country. This is positioning in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, and she tweeted just before I came on. She tweeted that for her, the general election is not about Brexit, not about Boris Johnson, not about no deal or a better deal. It's about independence for Scotland. And for the Liberal Democrats, they can see themselves picking up a swag of seats from the Labour Party or from the Tory Party in London and the South East. The thing is, it's about, for Jo Swinson, this is about being relevant again. By being so clearly and extremely a Remain party, she's made the Liberal Democrats relevant. And actually, when they say we'd like an election, people listen to them. She was on the Marsh show this morning talking about it. So there's something here about their brand recognition, their brand position. There's nothing here about the national interest. If it was about the national interest, people would be talking about the best kind of Brexit deal that would be the best for all parts of the country and all industries. That's not what anybody's talking about. And sadly, that's not even what the government's talking about, because they too are positioning themselves in respect to the opposition. So goodness knows what the Monday and Tuesday thing will be. And we know that the SNP and Jo Swinson herself personally would like to see that one-line bill amended. So the bill will be moved, and that'll be amended to death. And it'll be,
absolutely.
Will we get there by December the 9th and December the 12th? I don't think we are in a stalemate in Parliament, but in a way that's what the public want, because they voted for a hung Parliament. They rejected Theresa May's desire for a judge. So we're living with the consequence of that, but I'm sure we'll be talking about this more.
So could this deadlock, could this stalemate potentially go on for several months?
Well, it feels like it to me, and we've got this because we've got the other side of this is European politics, where the positioning of Angela Merkel is generous towards the UK because she's leaving politics. This is her last election. She fought her last election to be Chancellor last year, and you've got Macron, who's positioning himself against his opponents in the next presidential elections. He's being tough on Britain. There are all of the positions that have been taken are not actually for the economic interest or the social interests of European workers, European countries and their economies, or for British workers, British economies.
It's all about politics, isn't it?
Politics, isn't it? It's all about politics.
Yep, it's all about politics. John, thank you very much indeed. That was John McTernan, former Director of Political Operations for Tony Blair. And I have to say, I absolutely agree with his analysis. I don't think anything this week breaks this deadlock, breaks this stalemate. And I kind of think to myself that we may well go into the end of the year, the Christmas break. I think it could be quite some time before this gets broken. So is Boris Johnson right when he says that the Remainer parties are holding the country hostage over Brexit? And I have to say, I think what the Remainer parties are doing is damaging democracy and people's faith in democracy in the most extraordinary way. The number's 0345 6060 973. Particularly keen to hear from you if you're a Lib Dem, SNP, Green or Labour. Come on, tell me, has Boris got this wrong? Let's go to Axel in Edinburgh. Good morning to you.
Hi, Nigel. I'm an SNP supporter and a Remainer.
Yep.
And I don't think Boris is very good anyway, but I think Jeremy Corbyn is even worse.
Right.
I mean, the worst. I mean, it's just tragically bad luck in Britain that not only have we got one of the worst governments in history, but we've also got one of the worst oppositions as well. And I think Corbyn should agree to the vote of no confidence type thing, so we can have a general election to get it dealt with.
Well, a vote of no confidence, of course, would lead to under this Fixed-Term Parliaments Act, would lead to a 14-day period, cooling-off period, during which somebody would attempt to show the Queen that they could hold a majority in Parliament. And only then, if that failed, would it lead to a general election. But the trouble is, all you Remain parties can't agree who the figure is to head that up, can you?
I don't see that as particularly an issue because I'm only interested in the SNP.
Well, it is for the Lib Dems, Axel. It is for the Lib Dems, and that's the point. They will not back, a sort of emergency government with Jeremy Corbyn at the head of it. But, I mean, if the SNP, and let's be frank, your party does face some potentially very serious problems in January. The Alex Salmond case is going to trial. There are 14 charges of sexual misconduct, some of them very serious charges. And if the SNP want to have an election before that comes to trial and before the questions get asked about who knew what, why don't they just agree with Boris Johnson's plan for a general election rather than fiddling with it and coming up with a different date?
Because with the SNP votes, with the SNP seats in Parliament, that's not enough.
What do you mean it's not enough? Surely, if you've got a chance to have a general election and it's been offered for Thursday the 12th of December, why not accept that?
Because if we do accept it, that's still not enough to get 2/3 in the...
Well, but if the SNP help pave the way, who's to say the Liberal Democrats might agree and then there could be a split in the Labour Party and then we might start to get somewhere toward... I mean, I don't think we will, but we might start to get somewhere towards the 434 needed. I just don't see why the SNP are playing games. Either you guys want an election or you don't.
Yes, but then there's the politics involved of siding with the Tories is the worst thing you can do, which is a very strong feeling up here.
Well, it's not siding with the Tories. I tell you what, the Tories are laying down the gauntlet, Axel. They're saying, come on, we'll meet you outside on the 12th of December. And the SNP are coming back with a response of putting forward a one-line bill that can be amended. I mean, do they really want this election or don't they?
Yes, but we want it in our terms.
Yeah, well, there you go. Life isn't always like that, Axel, thank you. And it's the same story everywhere. They want it on their terms. The Lib Dems want it on their terms. And Labour, well, I don't know. What do Labour? Someone tell me what Labour really want here. 0345 6060 973, because I'm confused and I simply cannot tell you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. Does Boris Johnson have a point when he says that the Remainers in Parliament are holding the country hostage over Brexit? I think he does. And by the way, I'm not at the moment a cheerleader for Boris Johnson in any way at all, because I think the new EU treaty and political declaration that he signed up to, actually, if it was passed, would really be the death of Brexit, because we'd be stuck in a dreadful place for the next few years. We'd probably finish up with another referendum. So I'm not a fan politically of what Boris is doing, but on this big point, I think he's probably right. And it's very difficult to have a sort of proper conversation with people about this. I mean, we have tried in the last week. Joe Swinson, Chuka Ramuna, Ian Blackford, Philip Hammond, Sir Oliver Letwin, Dominic Grieve. I've asked them all to come on and have a chat with me and tell me why they don't think a proper Brexit should be delivered, but none of them seem to want to have that conversation. Is Boris right on this big point? I'm going to James in Barnes. We've spoken before. Good morning, James.
We have, Nigel. Good morning, sir. Nigel, I think, I want to remain, but I'm a no cheerleader for Jeremy Corbyn, under any circumstances. But I think that you only needed to listen to Ken Clarke in that debate the other night when Johnson lost the vote for his time of 3 days.
Yeah.
And Ken Clarke was talking, he was talking to a little boy who was refusing to get down from his climbing frame to come in for dinner. And he was saying to him so succinctly, Boris, you've done very well. You've passed your vote. All we want, my love, is to have a little bit more than 3 days. It's not asking a lot. It doesn't have to be 2 months. And he wouldn't go down that road because he does not want to have his deal scrutinised because it will start to fall apart. That's what I think, Nigel. And I think...
I have to say, James, I have to say that I was... Because I was in Brussels at that summit, as you know.
Yeah.
And by sort of 9, 10 o'clock on Friday morning, we kind of been up half the night with the lawyers, going through it clause by clause, trying to understand exactly what this great new deal of Boris's was. And it was clear to me that 95% of it was the same.
Sure.
He'd taken out the customs union bit, but he'd put Northern Ireland into a separate constitutional position. And he'd also signed up for the future trade talks and any future trade deal to regulate a alignment even on things like tax. So I went through this, and when I spoke to Eurosceptic friends in the Conservative Party, They all said, "Oh, isn't it great, Nigel? We're going to vote for this tomorrow." I said, "What? Have you actually read it?" Well, we haven't. I mean, nobody had read it. Nobody had scrutinised it. The newspapers were saying, "Isn't it wonderful?" I mean, if Mrs. May had put the same package forward 6 months earlier,
Absolutely,
she'd have been called a traitor almost. But the same newspapers who were saying it was a victory. And I think you're right. I think Boris tried to bounce Parliament and the country into this, and I'm actually grateful now that we've got a little bit of time, because I want people to understand what Boris was actually signing up to. And the thought that it gets Brexit done, James, all it does is take us into years more acrimonious negotiations.
Absolutely, Nigel. I think I've said this before about that I don't agree with anything you say, but I really think that you're the only person, I think, who believes in Brexit, who has no axe to grind apart from getting what you believe is right for this country. Boris only wants what's right for Boris and how it suits him and his power and it keeping him as Prime Minister, which is what Dominic Cummings is all about. And I really think you've got a leverage that you can, I'm sure that you know better than me, that you can now start to use to say, listen, we're going to a pact with you, but you've got to, it's got to be A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and I'm sure that that's what you will do. But I think that this is and I want to remain, but I'd rather leave on a basis that you would want that would be better for this country with some sort of orderly, sensible deal that is not forever having arguments in Parliament for the next 10 years.
Which is the great worry. James, thank you for the call. Well, there we are. You see, it is possible. Ardent Remainers and Leavers can actually have civilised debate. It may be that it's Sunday morning that helps. I don't know. Let's ask Taz, who's calling from Derby. Good morning to you.
Hello.
Taz, good morning. Good morning, good morning.
Hi.
Hi there.
Nigel.
So, which party do you normally support?
Well, I'm a Labour Party member.
Okay.
And I have been for a long while, and I know Jeremy Corbyn from before he was an MP.
Okay,
and
well,
my belief is we've got a lot of confusion because I think the basic setup is Boris Johnson is a Remainer and Jeremy Corbyn is a Leaver. Jeremy can't implement his policies because he's got a PLP that doesn't support him. And Boris Johnson, I guarantee we won't come out on Thursday. If he was, he would have found a way to push through, but he doesn't want Brexit. He wants to make sure the establishment overturns the democratic decision of the working class of this nation.
Well, I think, Boris, of course, had always been critical of the European Union, but always...
He's a con man.
Is he?
Yes. He's a liar, totally, I believe, amoral, and I don't think he's fit to be a leader of any nation.
But he is telling the country something that at the moment a lot of people are warming to.
He's spinning a yarn.
Okay, right. But does he have a point when he says that Remainers in Parliament are holding the country hostage? Doesn't he have a point?
No.
Well, I think he does, because, come on, all these people... I know
you do, because you have a line on it as well. You say you believe in democracy, but you haven't been elected democratically to your party.
Hang on. I led the Brexit Party to winning an election a few weeks ago.
I know you left the Brexit Party. That's history. You are now in a different party.
No. I'm just explaining to you that a few weeks ago I set up a new party that won a national election. But that's by the by. My position in this is by the by. My point to you is this.
Your position's very important. And your party could make a real difference.
My position is...
I don't believe you really want to see us come out.
What? You're having a laugh, aren't you?
You?
What do you mean you don't believe? What do I have to do?
Well, you could have stayed with a party, but you just keep switching positions. You're another pundit who can't be relied upon.
Hang on a second. I was with, from its first day, 26 years of my life with
I started
UKIP.
Campaigning against the EU before you did. I got arrested on the first referendum.
How old are you?
75.
Right, well, I'm sorry. I couldn't campaign.
I have more experience than you, that's true.
Well, all right,
I've seen more history than you,
look,
and I know when people are conning us. and we're conned constantly by you so-called pundits and leaders.
Now listen, I spent 26 years in UKIP. I was chairman of it, national campaign manager of it, head cook, bottle washer and leader for 11 years, and I packed it up because the party went rotten. Some would argue...
It was your party. Why weren't you running it in a way which is democratic? If it was, you might have got a different situation.
Sometimes when parties become very democratic, they can go wrong. The Labour Party, putting on lots of members, has made it go in a direction that many would say is anti-Semitic. But that's by the by.
The Labour Party has the potential for changing things because it is democratic and it has got a big membership.
All I'll say to you is this. I want us to have a clean break Brexit. I don't think we should be adjudged at the European Court of Justice. I think we should decide on our borders.
I agree with that.
We should decide on our legislation, and I've always fought for that.
I agree with that.
And I've always believed in that. And my biggest worry with all of this right now is that Boris will, at some point, get through this new EU treaty, which will leave us in some ways in a worse position than where we are. So
it is a good treaty, I agree. We need a much cleaner break.
Absolutely.
But we're not going to get it through Boris Johnson. We're not going to get it through the establishment, and we're not going to get it through the media and pundits like you.
Well, I tell you what, if I get a chance, you'll get it. I promise you. All right, thank you. Well, that was a very interesting phone call. It's not often that I'm sort of accused of being a Remainer, basically, so I have to ponder on that one for a moment. Yes, Boris is right. Parliament is holding the government hostage. They sure are turkeys who refuse to vote for Christmas, and I'm speaking as somebody who would prefer to remain. Well, Lazarus, interesting, isn't it, that you see the point that many see, which is for the Labour Party right now to have a general election, it would be a disaster for them, and I've got very little doubt about that. We're off to Norway to speak to John. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call. I hope you're all right. My point is just really simple. If all Boris has to do is take no deal off the table, then he's got his election. So why doesn't he do it? Because if he wins the election, he can then go and do what he wants. He can put no deal back on the table and take the UK out on a no deal. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, apart from one slight problem, which is that Article 184 of the treaty that he's so desperate to pass says that we will act in a manner to get a free trade agreement in line of the terms of the political declaration up until the end of the transition period, and that doesn't end till 2022. So the initial transition is to 2020, but actually it's already been written in that it goes up until 2022. So he would be, in a sense, breaching a treaty that he'd urge us all to sign, you know.
Have you had to memorise that?
I have, because I keep...
Oh, God, Nigel.
I keep being told. One of the reasons that the ERG voted for this treaty is because Boris has told them all in private, don't worry, we'll leave next December with no deal. But the reality, the chances of that are, I believe Boris as much that he would leave next December with no deal as I believe we'll leave on the 31st of October.
Right.
I just don't believe it. It. Your basic point that no parliament can bind its successor is true. And as and when we get a general election, Boris will then face a choice. Does he stick with this treaty, or does he go for a different approach? And I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, no, as I said, that for me, this is the obvious thing, is that if he thinks he's going to win a general election, and if he's genuinely, I'll spin the whole thing around in another way, is that I don't think he wants a general election, because if he did really want a general election, he would take no deal off the table, have his general election, win it, and then put no deal back on the table and take us out in the middle of November or whenever he wants.
I think the great British public might call that a lie too far, and that's perhaps the problem with that strategy. John, thank you. It is now 10:30. Time for the news with Serena Farrow. Well, it's Boris Johnson who's accusing Remainers of trying to hold us hostage, but OK, Boris can give it out, but I wonder when Boris is going to apologise. Yeah, I know, I really do, because, as John says to me on Facebook, isn't it amazing, all this talk about a general election, nobody's talking about the fact we are not going to leave on the 31st. And, you know, coming into the studio this morning, I passed some really big billboards, and you may have seen them on motorways as well, saying, get ready for the 1st of November. If your business imports and exports from the EU, make sure you're ready. The government's spending a lot of money on all of this. Now, Sajid Javid did on Saturday get up and say, we won't be leaving on the 31st of October, something regular listeners have heard here for a long time. But as yet, the man who said, we are leaving on the 31st of October, come what may, do or die, I'd rather be dead in a ditch than extend beyond the 31st of October. He didn't say, I'll do my best to get us out on the 31st of October. He didn't say, I will try. He didn't say, I'll do my damnedest. He said, we will be leaving on that date. And at some point this week, do you think the Prime Minister will apologise for misleading the nation? I don't think he will. I just don't think he will. But we're not leaving, folks. People will wake up on the 1st of November and we'll still be members of the European Union. That'll be interesting. But is he right to say Remainers are holding the country and Parliament and the government hostage? Lee is calling from Manchester. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, delighted to have you.
I'm a little surprised to have got through, actually. I thought I'd be one in a million in the queue.
Well, do you know what? It's really odd, Lee. Some people say, we got through easily. Others say they've been trying for 3 months. This
is my first time I've ever tried, Nigel.
Very well. Welcome. Well,
thank you.
Well, you're on LBC, Lee. The floor is yours. Does Johnson have a point when he accuses Remainers of holding us all hostage?
Right, well, let me just explain something about myself first. Originally, I'm very bewildered and confused by Brexit now in all straightness.
You're not alone, don't worry, you're not alone.
What about another 10 million people, yeah. I think this is. I'm not having a go at anybody, Nigel, but I will say this: the mess that Boris picked up after Theresa May was absolutely phenomenal. Now, in my personal view, I don't think he ever stood a chance of getting this job done without many bumps in the road, to be fair.
Uh-huh.
On the grounds of the state it was already in and the lack of confidence of the public. There's a lot of other things that go along with the lack of confidence in the public. It's not just Brexit. There's universal credit, there's other issues, there's the uncertainty around the financing of the NHS, the lack of doctors, the lack of nurses, the lack of information that people seem to share these days. All sorts of issues all rolling together, and that affects the public in many tens of millions, Nigel. What would concern me is already we're in some sort of state now. You've got the Liberal Democrats saying, we want to stop Brexit, to hell with the 52-48 votes. We've got others saying, yes, we're going to leave. We are leaving, dead in a ditch if we don't on the 30th, on the 31st. Well, apparently, by the way, I noticed on Facebook last night there's various photoshops of Mr. Johnson in ditch photos, by the way.
Oh yes, I've seen one. I have seen one or two of those.
I was in absolute stitches when I saw them. I thought, well, you asked for that, Boris. You really did. But ultimately, I feel a bit bad for him because he was in such a messy situation when he walked into it.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. He was dealt a very difficult, hand.
Very much so, yes.
And if he'd said to people in the Conservative leadership election, and then as Prime Minister, if he'd said, I will do my utmost to get us out on the 31st of October, that's fine. But saying
that would have been a lot better.
But this is the way he's gaming it, Lee, right? He says we will be leaving, and then after we haven't left, he says it's not my fault, Gov, it's everybody else. That's why he's done it this way, and that in itself isn't it a bit cynical, Lee?
Say the least, yes. I do remember a very similar situation with the previous Prime Minister, though. This is the thing. She basically sat up and said, yes, we are in a mess, and we would maybe have been out of that situation if you'd gone for my deal in the first place. So it was like she was also saying, it's all your fault. I tried my best, but it's all your fault.
And she, very interestingly, up until February, early March of this year, her personal popularity was quite high, and then it fell off a cliff. We'll see what happens with the Prime Minister. Lee, thank you for your call. Now, Linda in Mansfield says, Labour are holding the country hostage. They're running scared of an election because they'll get annihilated. The longer the standoff goes on, the more support Boris will get from the public, in my opinion. Linda, I disagree with that because I think this. I think people who've said in large numbers, good old Boris, he wants to get Brexit done. I think as the next few weeks go by, people will understand that Boris's definition of getting Brexit done, in fact, would keep us trapped inside the thing for a very, very long time at a huge cost, and is not recognisable to many of us as being Brexit. But we'll see. That's just my guess. Mark on Facebook says, Blair agreed with you. Are you worried you're doing something wrong? So Tony Blair did say over the weekend, as Alistair Campbell had done towards the end of last week, that Nigel Farage's analysis of Boris Johnson's deal is one of the better ones. It's there on YouTube. It's a 7-minute portion of a speech I gave. Well, Mark, I'm not used to Tony Blair being on my side. I'm not used to Alistair Campbell being on my side. Clearly, they want to remain fully part of the EU, and I want to leave, and they're kind of highlighting that Johnson's there in the middle, because what Blair really wants is a second referendum, and he's hoping that I will back his call for a second referendum because I'm so appalled by Johnson's deal. What I want to do, I want people to know the truth about what this new EU treaty really is. Mark is calling from Haverfordwest. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Nigel. Can I ask you, really, I'm a little bit confused, really, because the thing is that I'm a leaver, okay? Mm-hmm. But now I'm stuck in the middle of everything now, because the thing is, with the way Parliament is stuck in, this government is totally like sort of a lame duck, really. And it seems to be going on and on and on. And with the election as well, even that is neither here nor there. But for me, the problem I have now is that although everybody's talking about these treaties and the backstop, etc., and trade deals after, what is the detail of this treaty that means something to us after Brexit?
The detail, Mark, is this. The detail, Mark, is this. We would leave the EU in name, but be committed to entering into a negotiation with Monsieur Barnier, who, of course, has been reappointed, so skillfully did he do his job in the last 3 years, and the terms of the new so-called free trade agreement are written down clearly in the political declaration that Boris seems so keen on. The reason, Mark, he doesn't want people to see it or read it, is it says that in order to get that trade deal, we will have to have regulatory alignment on social rights, employee rights, environmental law, and even taxation. So effectively, we would still be bound by EU law without being a member of the European Union, and that is not where we should be, Mark. If we want to have a trade deal, it should be along the lines of Canada. You know, if Canada sell us goods, they have to conform to our market specifications. That's fine. But Canada does not have to adjust its taxation policy or its employment laws in line with Brussels.
Hasn't it been said about, like, sort of, you said the Canada deal? Yeah. That's been like sort of that's come about a while ago now, that they said that's rebadged a TTIP deal. That's what that actually is in detail.
Well,
but can I just say one thing that I'd like to
it all depends, Mark, doesn't it? It all depends whether your objective with a free trade agreement is to remove barriers to trade or whether it is political and regulatory alignment. Mark, we're completely out of time. I'm really, 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 really sorry. Now, it's being reported that security was scaled back at Zeebrugge and that officers were diverted to deal with the migrant crisis in the Channel. Police are currently working to identify the bodies of the 39 people found dead in the back of that refrigerated lorry in Essex. What do you think the solution to all this is? Is it more money for the Border Force? 0345 6060 973. Is it we've got to be tougher on illegal immigration? People can't stay. Text to 84850. And any ideas you've got, because government doesn't seem to, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and comment there too. Ribs, the little dinghies, coming across towards Dover and other parts of the Kent and Sussex coast during the course of this summer. And you know, my feelings on this are really quite strong. I'm very surprised that so few people have drowned in the Channel. Only one that we know of. There may have been more. But the thing that really shocks me is only 6% of illegal migrants coming across the Channel have been deported. 6%! So the message is, it's a flat, calm, lovely day. Start up the outboard engine. Get across to our side of the Channel. And if you don't make it all the way, the Border Force will pick you up, give you a cup of tea, put you in a hotel in Folkestone for the night, process your papers. You apply for asylum, and then you just disappear. And that's what's happening. I'm afraid the sheer numbers coming by boat is probably very small to the numbers that are coming in trucks, lorries, caravans, and everything else. What do we do about it? What solutions do we have? I think I've got half an idea. And before I came on air, I spoke to Tony Smith, the former Director General of the UK Border Force, and he's now the Managing Director of Fortinus Global Limited, a border security consultancy. And I started off by asking him why the number of returns of illegal immigrants is so low.
Yes, Nigel, it's really quite difficult to return illegal migrants these days. The Border Force are responsible, of course, alongside first responders for making sure that, when they do crop up, they're safe and well. They go into a holding centre where they will be screened and debriefed. But usually, in my experience anyway, a lot of them will make applications to stay in the UK, potentially on grounds of political asylum or human rights. And that process does not involve the Border Force. The case, if you like, is managed by others in the Home Office, and that can be quite a long, drawn-out process. There are arrangements in place where if we can show that they've already claimed a political asylum in a European country, that they may be returned there for the claim to be considered, but it takes quite a long time. And therefore, this sort of fuels a supply chain because people see that others are making it across, see that they're not being returned, and that's just sort of more money in the smugglers' pockets. Yeah,
I mean, it just sort of looks like an open door. Basically, it's worth the risk because if you get to the UK, you're very unlikely to be sent back. And that does make a lot of people very, very angry. Now, all this focus that we have is Dover-Calais. Dover-Calais. It's all anybody sees and talks about. And suddenly, Purfleet, for horrible reasons, of course, 39 deaths, is in the news. I spoke to somebody who lives in Purfleet who said to me it was very well known that in the middle of the night, vans would be waiting there, people would come out of the back of lorries and disappear off into the country. Was Purfleet known to the Border Force as being a regular place for this kind of activity?
Yeah, there was an inspection done we have an independent chief inspector of borders, Nigel, who comes in and looks at our operations, and he did that in 2015, 2016. Looked at all the ports on the East Coast, feeder ports, and wrote a report to say what our higher risks are. Purfleet is what we call a freight port. There's no passengers there. The Border Force are required under their operating mandate to focus on passport checks, and so the top priority, everybody who arrives at a border point from foreign has to have their passport checked. But freight checks are not necessarily routinely done on all freight. It's just not possible. But Purfleet, the answer to your question, Purfleet, yes, is on the radar. Zeebrugge is on the radar. They're all on the radar. But the problem, Nigel, is, this is like displacement of, because we've done quite well, actually, in Calais. If you look at the figures on detections in Calais, they've gone down from about 80,000 in 2015 to about 30,000 last year. So the smugglers have realised it's really quite hard to get someone through Calais. What should we try next? Well, I'll try the small boats, as you say, and quite a lot of that in the last year, which wasn't happening on my watch. And now, they're resorting to even more desperate measures by locking people in frozen containers, which is, of course, highly, highly dangerous, high risk for us. So it's not that it wasn't on our radar, but it's really quite difficult to keep up with the smugglers when they keep changing their tactics.
And is it right that the heat detection units don't work if people are inside refrigerated units?
I don't know, Nigel. I'm not a technician on terms of this. I do know they come in all shapes and sizes. I've seen them. They're detached with lots of technology on them now. So we will be able to check both the cab and the container back to where it was loaded, which points it's gone through. I'm sure that's what's going on right now. So we will very, very good tracking mechanisms for these things. But yeah, I mean, inside of these, you get locked in. You can't get out. And normally, you know, you would want you would want a driver at least to be with the vessel if you're in the back of it. The drivers just leave it and drive off. It might be some days before another driver comes up and picks it and moves it on, if you see what I mean. And so, you know, this is highly, highly dangerous, highly risky, and well, it's just frightening, isn't it?
Do we have any best guesstimate of just how many people are coming illegally into the UK every year?
Well, no, by definition, we wouldn't know that unless they come to our attention. But, I mean, people, as you say, you know, they do tend to put themselves forward now and claim asylum. So asylum intake is generally quite a good indicator of numbers. And the numbers have been fairly level, around 30,000 a year in the last few years, creeping up a little bit. But for us at the Border Force, because we've got a single Border Force responsible for checking passports and goods and freight, we've got about 8,000 officers dotted around the place. We can't do everything, Nigel. We have to resource to what we call risk, and so we rely very much upon intelligence, upon targeting, upon the industry themselves, the port operators in Zeebrugge, the ferry companies, the port operators here in the UK to work with us, you know, to detect threats. We can divert any container to any port we want to and inspect it thoroughly, but of course, you know, we can't do that in every case.
I know that money's not always the answer to things, but is there an argument here for the Border Force to have more resources?
Well, I mean, we'll have to see where we go now. Yes, I mean, I think the answer for me would be collaboration. We had a minister went over there in 2015 and signed a joint agreement with the Belgian and the Dutch customs, and that's really where, you know, they do stop a lot, Nigel, themselves, actually, that you don't hear about in the news. Lots of people do get offloaded at Zeebrugge and at the Hook of Holland by them. And we have a joint intelligence cell with them, so we've got officers working with them. I'm really keen to build on that. So a collaborative approach, and see a container was moving through a series of checkpoints from, you know, the point of loading into the port, where there will be security, onto the ferry, where there'll be more security, customs inspections by the Dutch and the Belgians, looking for, you know, risk-based targeting like we do, makes our job a lot easier, because then, you know, if there are any, you know, that collaborative approach means that we can resource according to what we see, and we categorise category A, B, C targets, which we can then prioritise research. So to me, it's, yes, we would always want more resources, more technology, but for me, it's all about collaboration and working with everybody else along the supply chain, because nobody wants this to happen. We've got a common purpose there, and I would be certainly, if I was still there, I'd be working on that. Yeah,
and of course, the big story today coming from the Remain side of the argument is that with Brexit, Europol and other European agencies will not work with us in the future. What do you have to say to that point that's being made?
Well, we spoke about that before, Nigel, about collaboration, and there's a number of clauses in the political declaration and other mechanisms which would enable us to continue to work with law enforcement partners in Europe, you know, whether or not we're part of the European Union, as I understand it. I would certainly be pressing that whatever happens with Brexit, we do need to be part of that setup. We need to work with the French, the Belgians, with Europol, you know, and other countries as well, for that matter, in order to detect international organised crime. That's what this is. It's international organised crime. It demands an international organised response. And so I would hope that whatever comes out of the politics of all this, we will still be able to work with our friends and partners on mainland Europe.
No, absolutely. And finally, Tony, are the French trying that hard, or are they quite happy for the problem to come to us?
Well, I think you know, the French are doing what they can, and you know, they have a number of agencies. There's the douane and the PAF. There are various enforcement agencies, Nigel, that we work with in France, and we work again in a joint capacity with them. We have officers over there, as you know, in Calais. We actually have a British zone where we do our own checks in the port of Calais. So we do work very, very hard with them on a joint purpose to try and take out smugglers. But I think people just need to understand the sheer problem of irregular migration in the EU. Significant numbers still coming in, you know, through the Balkans. The Med route is exposed again. We've got a European border agency, but once you get into Europe, and there's a number of ways in there, as you know, then you haven't got any borders. You've got the Schengen zone, and people can just head up towards
absolutely. Well, that was Tony Smith, former Director General of the UK Border Force. And what I take from that is that the Border Force have rules that they try and operate. and if people are found to be in UK territorial waters or on UK land, the Border Force put them through the system. But once they get into the Home Office, once they get into the asylum application system, then even if those asylum claims are refused, very, very few people ever get sent back anywhere, because most have disappeared by that stage. So what is the solution to all of this? Well, I'm going to go down the Tony Abbott route. Now, Australia, of course, is much further away from other land masses than we are, and I understand that. But Australia did face a problem very similar to the one we've seen in the Mediterranean since 2015. Large numbers of people coming across the oceans to Australia to claim asylum. And as you can imagine, things went wrong, and people were starting to drown in quite large numbers. And Tony Abbott said, not just in Australia, but advertised in those parts of Asia that people were coming from, and he said this: anybody that comes to Australia via this route and comes to our country illegally will not be able to claim asylum and will be immediately deported. And you know what happened? They stopped coming and people stopped drowning. And the reason we're talking about this is, of course, because of the tragic death of 39 people. But for those 39 that died, how many more came in through Purfleet over the course of the last month or 2 months? I know someone that lived there who said to me, 2-3 in the morning, there'd be vans waiting to pick people up from the back of lorries and spirit them away across the rest of the country. Some people say there may be 500,000 illegal immigrants living in Britain. Others say there may be 1 million. Of course, it's the international trafficking gangs that run all of this for big money. And many of those people, those unfortunates that died in the back of that refrigerated truck, many of them, of course, would have effectively gone into a virtual slave economy in this country. This is all pretty beastly stuff at every level. I think we need to be a lot tougher about this. I want your thoughts on it, please. What should we do? 0345 6060. We have an illegal immigration problem. Those that come across the channel are just the most visible part of it, but I suspect by number that may even be a relatively small part of it. The Dover-Calais route has been tightened up. Indeed, if you drive now through Calais, there are the most incredible fences and barriers everywhere. In fact, sort of driving through the Eurotunnel, it looks more like a prison camp now. But, of course, the tighter it gets at Calais, in a sense, means the smuggling gangs move to other locations. And it was only a few weeks ago that LBC's Rachel Venables did her own undercover reporting, and she went out to Dunkirk and met some of the people smugglers, and it was a great piece of journalism, but it is happening on a scale that's worrying. What should we do? Do you have a solution? 0345 6060 973. David is in New Cross. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Nigel. Right, I'd just like to say a few points. When you look at it, I looked at the official data. UK's got 7,000 miles of coastline, 11,000 miles of beach. Now, how would we propose to stop them from coming in, given the fact that amount of area to cover and all the access points?
Because in practical terms, David, you can understand why in a small rib you can cross the channel and land on one of the sandy or even shingly Kent beaches. But in practical terms, to go further afield in the UK, you would need a much bigger boat, and you're going to need a harbour or a river or something to come into. But hey, David, look, I'm not splitting hairs. We clearly can't police 7,000 miles. We have over 100 recognised ports in this country. It is a hell of a job, and it was why I asked Tony Smith earlier in that interview, did the Border Force need more resources? But isn't the truth of it, David, even if the Border Force catch more of these people, hardly any of them ever get sent back anyway?
Well, that's true, but you quoted Australia. Now,
I did, yeah. Tony Abbott, yeah.
is a lot rougher seas, and we're closer to Europe than Australia, and the seas are more ambient. You got more access points.
Well, I wouldn't be so sure about the English Channel at times, but particularly with the strength of tide. No, David, I do accept Australia is different. But, I recommended to Jean-Claude Juncker that Europe operate the same approach. And yet, how many thousands have died in the Mediterranean in the last 4 years? I mean, really, we're talking about harrowing thousands of people. What I'm saying, David, is you stop the deaths, you stop the trafficking gangs, exploiting people on this scale. You make it clear that if people are genuinely seeking asylum, they have to apply somewhere else.
Yeah, but you see, with us leaving the EU under certain circumstances, I know till Brexit.
Yeah.
What's the chances of us having a good, great working relationship with the EU in regards to the border forces? They might say, "Well,
what do we have one
mate,
now?
You're by yourselves." We haven't. But
I mean, David, I would say this to you: as members of the EU, we see their own attempt to police their borders in the Mediterranean are a complete and utter farce. And as far as our cooperation with the French on this is concerned, well, let's talk rugby, shall we, after England's magnificent win yesterday. And poor old Wales just lost out to South Africa this morning. But in rugby terms, and it's going to be rugby all week, of course, heading up to the final next Saturday morning. In rugby terms, I put it to you, David, that the French authorities are playing wing three quarters and are happy for the problem to come across to us.
No, I agree on that point. Yeah, I do. I agree there.
So whether we're in the EU or out of the EU, frankly, I don't think it's going to make very much difference. Where we will, of course, want to cooperate fully is in terms of terrorism. And believe you me, David, when it comes to intelligence, we have more to offer them than they do to us. So I'm not concerned about that. David, my feeling is you send out the big signal. If you come here illegally, you won't be allowed to stay, and that will deal, I think, with most of the problem.
Yeah, you got a point there.
All right, David, thank you. Off to the Isle of Man to speak to Godfrey. Good morning, Godfrey.
Good morning, Nigel.
Welcome.
Long time no speak.
I know. Very nice to have you back on the show. So, Godfrey, come on. What's your solution?
Okay, well, I think you're right about Australia. I think that is the first step. I think we should ban all asylum seeking from those who choose to just chant their arm. Cameron was right. We should lift asylum seekers out of the camps, UN camps and what have you, legitimate, known, those who are really suffering at the hands of the countries they live in.
Yes, and nobody, Godfrey, nobody ever thinks about the Christians, do they? The Christians...
No, absolutely. Now, interestingly, my daughter is a Christian, and she's married to a Christian Sudanese.
Yeah.
He helped set up the state of South Sudan. So I have form on this. I run a kids' home in Nairobi. I rescue hundreds of kids a year from street prostitution in the big westernized city of Nairobi. And I also am married to an African. I'm married actually to a Malagasy.
Yeah.
And I also support lots of families in Madagascar, where the government has just passed a law forbidding young women being dispatched to places like Kuwait as housemaids, never to be seen again. And my daughter pleads with me. She says, even in the most remotest villages of South Sudan, where she and her husband now run a medical mission with my 3 half Sudanese grandkids, and she's been there 10 years through the establishment of South Sudan, and she says, there, the communities are being trafficked now. It's sell your cattle, the only thing you've got. Sign this paper, and your kids can have a new life in Britain or wherever, and we'll ship them off. They're never seen again. They don't even reach Libya and the boats. These people are trafficked long before then, sold off for sex slavery or whatever.
Slavery,
and she said it's
slavery.
absolutely appalling. And here's a fact. I used to be in the mobile data business, and here's a fact. The world now has 7 billion people. 3.5 billion of them earn less than $2.50 a day.
Yeah.
But 70% of all the world's population now has a mobile phone. 50% of them have access to data. So they see all this stuff and are fed all this stuff online. And even in the most undeveloped countries like Sudan, but certainly in Kenya, Madagascar, the ownership of phones is approaching more than 50%. And half of those they're all in the hands of young people. These are the victims of this stuff. So we have all of that. I mean, the whole Western economy has sort of, geared up the poorest nation. Well, how they can afford mobile phones is always a mystery, but they do. And yet these poorest people are being fed. So, Merkel's partly to blame as well, because, let's face it, the EU does have a hidden agenda, which is to destroy national identity, and one way is flood it with immigrants.
And, of course, the stronger the pull factors, the greater the crime, the more people are going into slavery. Yeah, no, Godfrey, listen, fascinating phone call. Thank you so much for sharing those personal stories too. Very, very interesting. Dave in Dorset says, we have to check every vehicle. Simple. It's time-consuming, but the only way. Well, Dave, let me tell you, any worries people have got about Brexit and the borders, forget it. If we stopped every vehicle, gosh, there would be some pretty long tailbacks. Wouldn't more border staff pay for itself? Stopping the illegal immigration would save vast loads of taxpayers' money. Well, Ian, if the border force catch illegal immigrants, it costs more money because they get put in hotels or they get put in detention centres. I know the Labour Party at their conference want to close down all detention centres and extend freedom of movement wider than just the European Union, but I don't believe that has much public support. What that effectively would do is make illegal immigration legal. Nigel, I live in Greenhithe, over the river, and migrants jumping out the back of lorries is common. Do you know, whoever you are, I hear this story all over the place. I repeat the point. The boats coming across the English Channel, and only 6% of those who come by that route being returned, is the tip of the iceberg. Robert is calling from Dulwich. Good morning, Robert.
Hi, Nigel. I'm half Haitian, a little island dictatorship in the Caribbean.
Yep.
And people have been leaving there on boats for forever.
Yep.
And they used to try and get to Miami. And we'd hear when, there'd be a load of people would just disappear. And so, this problem, people trying to get somewhere and dying, has been going forever. But what upsets me is I'm a big Brexiteer and all the rest of it. And for years, people have tried to say we've got a problem with illegal immigration, with immigration, full stop. We need to discuss it and be adults about it.
Yes.
And I'm so angry with these liberal lefties who, without understanding the problem, just shouted racist at us.
Oh.
And I'm half black, right?
Robert.
These people have to assume their responsibility. These deaths are down to these silly ideas where you don't want to deal with a problem, so you shout racist at someone so we can't have a discussion.
I couldn't agree more, Robert. Do you know what? I've stood up on this issue for over a decade and said, whoa, hang on a second, let's get a grip. Let's start doing this properly. And for years, vilified in the most horrible way for even daring to discuss it. And Robert, I tried back in the early part of 2015, as the migrant crisis across the Mediterranean started and Jean-Claude Juncker kicked into gear the European Union's own asylum policy. I warned them publicly again and again and again that our so-called compassion would kill a lot of people, and thousands have died in the Mediterranean. Do you think, Robert, we are now able to have a grown-up conversation on this, or is it still you get screamed at for daring?
Nigel, when I listen to some of the conversations on even your radio station, there's a presenter that will go unnamed, and the lies that are perpetrated. And what gets me, what I can't understand, is I'll have white, liberal, middle-class types telling me, a half-black person, that I must be racist.
Yes.
Because I think that essentially subsidising global criminal organisations that are trafficking people for slave labour and for prostitution is a bad thing. What I want to understand in the liberal left mind is, where do these people, but how can you be so dishonest to yourself? Because what is it about by saying, oh yes, let everyone come? Your caller earlier, 2.5 billion people live in economies where they earn less than $2 a day. Every year, 70 million people are born into economies every year where they earn less than $2 a day.
Yeah.
And we think we're going to solve that problem
I know.
by taking a tiny fraction.
I know.
It's laughable.
Robert, very passionate phone call, great phone call, thank you. This is the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It is now 11:31 and time for the news with Serena Farrow.
It's been widely reported that the Islamic State leader is dead. US officials haven't yet confirmed claims he's been killed in a raid in Syria, but the president is set to make a major announcement this lunchtime. There's criticism of a plan between the Lib Dems and SNP for a pre-Christmas election. It backs a poll on December the 9th if the EU grants a 3-month Brexit extension and the risk of a no-deal exit is removed. And South Africa have beaten Wales 19-16 in the Rugby Union World Cup semi-final. They now move on to face England for the title on Saturday. LBC weather, wind and rain for much of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales and North West England. Elsewhere fine and dry with a high of 12 degrees.
This is LBC. Time is money. Or so money says. Well, money. I know you like to dictate every hour of every day, add to my to-do list and throw the odd spanner in the works. But not anymore. This is my business, and I run it on my watch. I'm in control now, money. And times are changing. Save time with instant business invoicing, now on the Barclays app. Search Barclays Business and make money work for you.
Must have a Barclays business account. T's and C's apply.
The B&Q 3 for 2 offer is now on, including an unmissable 3 for 2 on all paint, such as Dulux, Valspar and Farrow & Ball. For this show-stopping deal, hurry to B&Q. You can do it when you're 3 for 2 it. Every third item per single transaction in descending price order free. Offer ends November 3rd. See DIY.com.
Can I have chemo at home?
It's only suitable for a couple of types of cancer.
It depends on the type of treatment.
You'll have to go to a doctor.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
Here at LNER, we love giving you more value. And we all love more, don't we? More sleep, more sun, more me time. So we've added our new Azuma trains with more seats and more great value fares. In fact, there are 3,773 more £29 single tickets every week on our Azuma trains between London and Leeds. Brilliant. Book direct to lner.co.uk, launching alongside existing LNER trains.
Betting with a traditional bookie is like an orchestra that only plays the triangle. But on the Betfair Exchange, you have more ways to bet with more opportunities to win. You can even lay a bet, which means betting on something not to happen, or set your own odds and see who takes them on. Why not give it a go? The Betfair Exchange.
Exchange customers pay up to 5% commission. Other charges may apply. 18+, begambleaware.org.
Money. How does that word make you feel? You might be thinking about what you'd love to spend it on, or what you have to spend it on. Maybe you think you're just bad with money, but here's the thing. You're not. You're just with the wrong bank. At Starling Bank, we want you to feel good about money. So we built a personal and business bank account with clever budgeting tools, instant payment alerts, and no fees when you spend overseas. Starling Bank. Voted Britain's best bank twice. Download the app today. Smart Money People Awards. Eligibility criteria applies.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Well, we may not be leaving the European Union on the 31st of October, not that the Prime Minister's yet admitted that, though Sajid Javid did over the weekend. But one thing is happening on the 31st of October. Someone is leaving their job on the 31st of October, and I couldn't be happier about it. Yes, Speaker John Bercow is exiting on the 31st of October, and I'm absolutely delighted by it. Let's hear a bit of vintage Bercow, shall we?
Order! Order! Sit, order! I know what I'm doing. Order! 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 There's no good people shouting. There will be an opportunity for other points of order, but the Prime Minister must and will be heard. Order! Order! The Honourable Gentleman has got to learn the art of patience.
Oh, God.
And if he is patient, if he deploys Zen, he will find that it is ultimately to everybody's advantage. So we'll leave it there.
Pompous beyond belief is my view. And you know, previous speakers, we had personalities who were speakers. I mean, Betty Boothroyd, without doubt, had a big personality. George Thomas, going back a bit further, quite a personality. Others were lower key. But here's the problem. It's not just his style. And by the way, did you notice on Super Saturday when the world was watching, even when there were just some vague murmurs, he was up shouting order and trying to be on the international stage. But that isn't my problem. His style, as I see it, pomposity, isn't the problem. The problem is he's not neutral. And the point of that job for 800 years is to have a neutral chair. And this man, he lets you know his views on Brexit, his views on Donald Trump and many, many other things. He's ripped apart constitutional practice in this country, in some cases saying, now I'm doing this because there's a precedent set in 1604, and the next week saying, no, I'm setting new precedent now today by allowing backbenchers to take over control of the order paper and to put down motions for legislation. Be pleased to see the back of him. Now, back on to the tragic story, 39 horrible deaths. Illegal immigration into the UK, a problem. Not just the UK, other countries have that problem too, but it seems to me we are not doing enough to send the right messages out. Now, my next caller is Jane, who is calling from somewhere in Africa. Jane, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Whereabouts are you, Jane?
I don't think I'd like to tell you. It might have repercussions.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, it's rather hot at the moment. It's 36.
Right.
And the reason you get all these people wanting to come to UK is because UK is portrayed in Africa as a land of milk and honey. Free education, free hospitals for all the people that have AIDS, high blood pressure,
yes,
TB, and so on. And plenty of money. And until you portray UK as a rotten place to come with bad weather, people sleeping rough, people queuing for food, you won't stop these people coming. They see it in a totally different light.
Do they see the UK? Do they see the UK, Jane, as being that much more attractive than Germany or France or other European countries?
Yes. When you say to them, why don't you go to France? Oh, no. UK's the place to go. Much better treatment.
And do they get, when we have a disaster like these 39 deaths in the back of in a refrigerated truck, do these stories not deter anybody?
Most of them don't have television.
Right, so
they pay for everything they want, and they don't see these things. They just see a bit. Was it Dick Whittington who saw London paved with gold?
Absolutely.
That's their idea of UK. Jobs,
and
money,
health.
I mean,
yeah. No, I do understand it, Jane.
Most of them that come over are suffering from something. I can tell you that, and they see it as a way, for treatment. Once they're established, they bring their family over, free education, and free housing.
I raised the HIV point back in the 2015 general election, and I got a lot of abuse for it. But yeah, it's a national health service, not an international health service, was the point I was trying to make. Jane, if the message went out that anybody who illegally entered the United Kingdom would not be entitled to all of these things and would be returned to from whence they came, would that stop people coming, do you think?
Of course it would.
Okay.
They wouldn't even dream of wasting their money. I mean, they save up to come over simply because they see it's a better life.
And
they're getting free for what they have to pay for in their own country.
And you can't blame people for wanting better lives. Of course not. But no, the message. Jane, you've answered my question beautifully. If we sent the message, people would have a different perception. Thank you. Wasn't that fascinating? She wouldn't say where she was from for whatever reason, but somewhere towards the southern part of Africa, I'm guessing. It's the land of milk and honey, and that's why they want to come. Marilyn says, I like to think that the UK is generous and sympathetic, but there comes a point where we have to say enough is enough. OK, no one likes to see people suffer or live in awful conditions outside of the UK, but there are plenty of people here suffering and living in terrible conditions too. Barry says, this country has been let down by successive governments, which is a strong causative issue leading to these tragedies. Barry, I'm convinced we're not getting the message out. And Jane felt, as I do, If the message was, hey, do you know what? If you come here illegally, nothing's for free and you won't be allowed to stay, they wouldn't be coming. I thought that perception of hers was very, very interesting. Ewan, is calling from Slough. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel. I do agree with you. This is largely about international organised crime.
Yes.
It is not about EU free movement. No, the EU has an aging demography and they have a limited supply of young mobile workers. So this is about international crime, as you pointed out, and it's about cooperation. If we can cooperate more with the EU, we can help to block this. And also, how do we actually fix this? Because if we look at immigration in the last few decades, has that increased? No, it hasn't increased. It's pretty much the same as it has been. Are we good at controlling our borders? Yes.
Well,
net migration. This is an important point. Immigration, is it important to our prosperity? Yes. But are we living longer? Yes, we're living longer as well. So we have a much heavier top-heavy demography. But immigration is very, very important. But as you pointed out, we need to stop the black market economy. That's the organised crime.
Yeah, I mean, look. There are a couple of different pillars here, aren't there? On the straightforward topic of legal immigration, all right? The numbers have stayed the same for 10 years, but they are astonishingly high numbers. I mean, we are talking about numbers up to 10 times the 60-year post-war average. So I would argue those figures are very, very high. We are heading inexorably for 70 million as the population of the United Kingdom by the end of the next decade. And I think in terms of the impact of that on people's quality of life, I'm concerned about it. But that's legal immigration, and we should, as a government, be able to have a degree of control over that. And Brexit, that was part of the Brexit argument. But on the illegal immigration,
yes,
I mean, if we were to deport people who illegally came to Britain, would there be a backlash within this country to say that somehow we'd lost our reputation for being generous?
That's a good question. I think what we really need to look at is, if you hear the horrible story, of people often just come to this country for a short period of time to make a bit of money. So how do we block that black market? Those people who are trafficking. Well, sometimes maybe short-term visas where people can come here, make a little bit of money and go back home safely. And if they abuse it, or anybody traffics them, or there's any traffic and they're caught up in that, then we would block them.
In theory, great, but in practice, how do we do it? I mean, one of the astonishing things in all of this, and I've saved this, I've wondered whether somebody else would mention it, Boris Johnson, leader of the Conservative Party, is all for a complete amnesty for 500,000 illegal immigrants living in Britain. And it seems to me if Boris did that as Prime Minister, another 500,000 would come, wouldn't they?
I think the idea behind that is to legalise this. If you make it legal, you bring people into our legal system. And if they're in the legal system, then you're in a position to deport them. It's just a smart way. You can't, we're not like Hitler's Germany where you have neighbours calling in on each other. That's kind of crazy. But we need to think of a real solution here. And I think if we encourage developing countries to form trade blocs and shield them from the wealth differentials that we have with countries like our own.
Yep.
We burn the wealth. We burn the vast majority of the planet's resources. No, we do. That's a fact.
Do you know what?
And if we can help those countries make trade deals, for example, with China, as trade blocs, and help them work together for vested interest and peace, that they rely on each other so their peace is important.
I'm hoping...
Because that's really critical.
I'm hoping that a post-Brexit Britain leads the way in a completely new approach to Africa. The EU treats Africa, frankly, in the ways of the old colonial masters, and a different approach could well help, wealth differentials being a huge part of this. Thank you. This is the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, here on LBC, and it is 11:45.
Coming up at 12, Majid Noir's leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. What's the best way to shuffle cards?
Your best bet is to leave it to the people over at Bet Victor Live Casino.
Place your bets, please.
Sorry, mate, got to run. The game's about to start. Son, you see my bow tie?
Search online for Bet Victor's latest offers. 18 plus. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org.
Time is money. Or so money says. Well, money. I know you like to dictate every hour of every day, add to my to-do list and throw the odd spanner in the works. But not anymore. This is my business, and I run it on my watch. I'm in control now, money. And times are changing. Save time with instant business invoicing, now on the Barclays app. Search Barclays Business and make money work for you.
Must have a Barclays business account. T's and C's apply.
This October, you won't find a no deal at Robert Dyer's. Right now, get up to a third off top quality bakeware and cookware. Plus, find loads of great deals across top brand kettles, soup makers, blenders and more. Visit one of our 93 stores or click and collect to over 250 locations nationwide at robertdyers.co.uk.
On a child's bedroom window, a little wall crawler spots a skyscraper on the far side of town. Determined to reach it, the little wall crawler slowly and surely begins to climb down. Out of the window, along rooftops and branches, the wall crawler hurries, sure-footed and swift, till finally reaching the distant skyscraper. In one single bound, it jumps into the lift. It rides to the rooftop and stares at the view, where now in the sunshine, the whole city gleams. Then over the edge goes the little wall crawler, to crawl down the wall of the wall crawler's dreams. Determination can get you where you want to be. At Royal London, we're customer owned, so our only focus is getting you there. Pensions, investments, life insurance. Royal London, determination since 1861.
Royal London.
The B&Q 3 for 2 offer is now on, including an unmissable 3 for 2 on tiles and flooring, like real wood and laminate. So hurry to B&Q. You can do it when you're 3 for 2 it. Excludes cut-to-measure flooring, flooring accessories and underlay. Every third item per single transaction in descending price order free. Offer ends November 3rd. See DIY.com.
Swill Heating is on a myth-busting mission. It really isn't cheaper to leave your heating on all day. But there is lots of smart technology that can cut your heating bills. For specialist advice on innovative heating devices, visit swillheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Fly Ryanair to Dublin this winter. Cozy up with live music in one of Dublin's pubs. Check out the free museums or head to the coast for delicious seafood. Fly to Dublin from just $24.99 per person one way. Ryanair. Low fares made simple. Limited availability. Book by November 30th for travel by the end of March 2020. For conditions, see ryanair.com.
Play along with our 10-second teaser. Ready? What is the world's oldest currency that's still in use today? The answer is our very own pound sterling. If you got that right, you must be pretty smart. So you'll know who to choose for your business accounting, audit and tax affairs. Search Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for business.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
The deaths of 39 people in the back of that refrigerated truck have sort of got the debate going again. We kind of just got used to these little boats coming across the channel, but people, I think, are shocked when they realise only 6% of those that come through that route actually get returned. What are we to do? Well, we're going to go to Grays now in Essex and speak to Jason. Jason, you're just down the road from where this tragedy was discovered.
Yeah, and I think that's the most appropriate description. You called it a tragedy.
Yes.
I saw an interview with one of the victims' parents on TV this morning over in Vietnam, and they were getting text messages from their daughter who's in the back of the truck saying, "I'm so sorry, Mum and Dad. My journey wasn't successful. I can't breathe. I'm not going to make it." And that brings it home. And then you hear that there was a convoy of 3 trucks. Not just this is the only one that we've found. Who knows what's happened to the people in the back of the other two.
There's another 60 or 80 people out there somewhere, yeah.
Either dead, dying, or alive somewhere, hopefully. And sometimes, Nigel, you need to take a step back from your nationalistic attitude towards this. Throwing a few hundred more border control officers around our coast, protecting our nation, protecting ourselves from these people that are only trying to make their lives better. You need to take a step back. This is an international, global problem. It's not just the United Kingdom these people are coming to. There was a guy interviewed on LBC last week from the United Nations. This is a $200 billion industry, people smuggling around the world. This poor girl pays $31,000.
The money's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. I mean, this is a $200 billion industry. Do you honestly think that us throwing a few hundred border control officers around our coast is going to stop people?
No, I don't. No, Jason, I don't. I don't.
I'll tell you how you stop it, Nigel.
Hang on, Jason. Jason, the point I was making here was that if you do increase the border force, all you do is you capture more people trying to come illegally, but they then go into the system, which ironically puts the price up even further.
Or you just divert them to and make it somebody else's problem. What we need to do is address this on an international basis. working with our friends and neighbours across the Channel, working with people at the United Nations, working against this $200 billion criminal industry on a global basis. That's where it needs to be attacked. Just because something is illegal doesn't stop people doing it.
No,
it
doesn't.
You see kids drinking, you see kids smoking, you see people taking drugs every single day of the week.
But I thought the phone call we had, Jason, the phone call we had from Jane, if that wasn't her real name, but from Southern Africa, you know, the point that she made was that of all the countries, it's the United Kingdom that Africans where she lived look up to because they think everything's free, health's free, education's free, everything's free.
Yeah, and then if you're in Cuba, they look at the United States and they drown trying to get into Florida.
They do.
It's a global issue. It's not just the United Kingdom.
The Australians stopped the boats coming. Tony Abbott stopped the boats coming. It happened.
That's BS, because it's illegal. And as you said on your show today, you don't know how many illegal immigrants are coming into the country because you can't measure them because they're illegal. And your policy of stopping international aid to foreign countries, if we improve their lives at home with we're the fifth largest economy on the planet, fifth or sixth largest on the planet. It's our responsibility.
Right, Jason, I'm all for helping African countries improve their lot, okay? Absolutely. My feeling, and I've thought it for 20 years, is way too much of foreign aid goes to the wrong people, and it finishes up being people going to rich people in poor countries. I'm all for helping Africa. I think opening up on trade, stopping our abuse of their fisheries resources. I think there are many things we can do, but I'm not convinced that all foreign aid gets spent in the right way. Jason, lots of passion. I must move on. I've got a call from Sydney in Australia. John, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. My name is John, and I'm from India, originally from India.
Yes.
I came to the UK as a skilled migrant through the point system. I've got an English passport, and I'm now in Australia. I did the same thing. I came to Australia then on a skill on the same points-based system conducted by Australia. So I'm from India, I've got a UK passport and an Australian passport, and I've been through both the points-based systems of both countries. Now, your idea is extremely good. It will work, and I know it will work, because it's been tried in Australia. It was done by Tony Abbott a couple of years back. But it has definitely worked here. But my point is, you will find it, the UK will find it extremely difficult to implement this in its current form in the UK. Why is that? I hear you ask, why is that?
Go on.
The reason is because in the UK, I mean, I love the people of the UK. I'm British myself. My passport is British. But one big issue, and I work with people both here and there, and I can say this for certain, that most people in the UK, especially the Caucasian British, are extremely generous and kind, but at the same time, they're extremely afraid of being seen as anything less than generous or even racist. If you mention the R word to any of them, they run. Because they're so scared.
Yeah. John, I love the call, but we're losing the signal, and our listeners at home can't hear you. But John making an interesting point, that the points-based system, as far as he's concerned, works, but that's because John was trying to get into Australia legally. He also validated to some degree my point that Tony Abbott saying, you come through this route, mate, or whatever he said, you come through this route, you will not be allowed to stay. End of. And it did stop the boats from coming, and I think we've got to do something similar. I do accept it's a problem all over the world, but I think we're making it worse for ourselves. Let's go to Portsmouth and speak to John. John, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. As you may remember, I'm a truck driver.
Yes. Now, you are the perfect caller on this because, and we can't go into the details of that particular case at Purfleet for obvious legal reasons. But John, I mean, how often do you check the back of your truck if you're crossing the channel?
Well, I will say this. I don't go over to Europe basically because, number one, I don't want to deal with that problem.
Right.
But I know lots of other drivers that do Europe. Yeah. Now, one of the things I would suggest is basically a lot of the containers, etc., are actually sealed by the companies. Okay? Mm-hmm. So if there's illegal immigrants in there, then they've been put in there and it's then been sealed. Okay.
And yet the driver could, in a circumstance like... So are you saying in those circumstances the driver may not know?
The driver may not know at all, right? So therefore, if the driver's punished and it's a sealed container, then how would he know in the first place, right? There should be an option, for example, at the motorway services, whereby they can go and speak to somebody whereby they set up a border force at the services, ask them to come and check the vehicle if they suspect anyone is illegally on board, whether it's a sealed container or not. They should be able to do that. No prosecution, because they've come forward and said, look,
and John, John, weren't we told that at Dover we now had new heat-seeking technology, or is that not really in place yet?
Well, I don't know. As I say, I don't do...
No, I just wondered whether you did know, that was all. Yeah.
No, I haven't actually spoken to my colleagues about it. It's not... I've said, what's it like in terms of getting immigrants, and they said, to be honest with you, I haven't had any problem. But I know some people have, and obviously quite a few truck drivers by the sounds of it. But it should be... I mean, at the end of the day, it's usually the haulier's responsibility to make sure that the goods they're actually obtaining are correct. It's the driver's responsibility to make sure that he parks overnight in a secure location.
Which is not always easy.
Secure.
Which is not always easy, is it?
But if he's picking up a trailer that has been left in an unsecured location, he may not know what's on board. Yes, he can do the checks if he's able to, but if he's not able to, how does he check the vehicle?
Yeah, no,
how does
John,
he know that it's...
fair point. No, listen, lots of passion, and this is a huge subject. It hasn't gone away at all. It's just that it's been highlighted by this tragic death of 39 people. If it wasn't for Brexit, we would be discussing many of these issues. We'd be discussing things like knife crime on Sunday mornings, and many other huge issues. But it's Brexit that continues to dominate, and it will over the course of the next week. I'll be back tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. At 3 this afternoon, it's Ian Payne, but up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, a new report published today recommends that the global tech giant should be taxed on the basis of where their sales assets and labour force are located and not where they've decided to book their profits. Should we reform how we tax the large US tech giants? Before that, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is believed to have been killed in a US military strike in northwest Syria yesterday. What should US Middle East policy look like from here on in? But first, two of Corbyn's closest allies are at war over whether to back an early election. Labour officials fear the division will leave any election campaign in chaos. What should Labour's policy be going forward?